Hello, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces as well from last year. And of course, this year, I'm going to be doing some very different stories. So for those who are not here last year, I was doing stories from Blood and Gold, which was a show that I did at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2019. And it was exploring the legacy of colonialism and slavery. But I wanted to explore it through myth and legend and fantasy, because I feel that using these art forms, these kinds of stories, it gives us a third platform on which to stand when we're looking at quite difficult subjects. But I have been telling stories for quite some time, and I started telling stories because I wrote a children's book for my little girl, who is now not so little, she's 14. But when I was expecting her, I thought, how am I going to get this little child to identify with her African heritage? Because I grew up in Kenya, and I have very, very strong roots to my African heritage. And I travel back every year. And I thought, how? She's going to stay in Scotland. Her Scottish cultural heritage will be very strong. And so I thought stories were the best way to do that. So I wrote a little children's book for her. And I found an illustrator, wonderful illustrator, set up a publishing company, printed 1,000 copies, and then everybody, my friends, family, bought these copies, and I still had 900 and something copies. And so then I needed to shift these books, so I would hire centers and halls, and I would I would tell people the story in the hope that they would buy this book. And I never read from the book. I always just told a story, because I grew up without any television. We just had people coming to the house all the time. My mother would always tell stories. My grandmother was a wonderful storyteller. And so I grew up with that storytelling tradition. And then it kind of got lost when I moved to Scotland at 13, and we had Home and Away and Neighbours. And that was my storytelling then. So yes, I would just tell the story from this children's book. And somebody came to me and said, oh, you should visit the Scottish Storytelling Centre. I was like, what's that? And for those of you who know Edinburgh, there's the Scottish Storytelling Centre there. So I went, and then suddenly this world of storytelling opened up, and I had no idea that storytelling was a thing. It was just, I loved stories. So yes, I have been telling stories, all kinds of different stories. And I thought that maybe the first story I should share with you today is a creation story, because that, of course, takes us right back to the very beginning of the world. And when God first made the world, he started to hand out the amount of time that each sentient being would have. So to the mighty baobab tree, he gifted 1,000 years. And then to the tiny little fly, he gave just a few hours. So time after time after time after time was given out until there were only 4 creatures left. There was the human being, there was the mighty ox, there was the dog, and there was the monkey. And God summoned the human and said, human, your job is very important, because you must keep the balance of the world. You see, the world is always going to change and evolve, and you must use your imagination, use your creativity. Think, experiment, play, try out new things, and if you fail, try again, but you must keep the balance. 30 years. Oh, thank you, God, said the human. And then God turned to the ox and said, ox, your job is also important, because you are going to help the human. You see, the human is very, very smart, but the human is weak. The human lacks physical strength, and that is where you come in. Whenever the human needs power and force, you will come and help the human. 30 years. But do you think the ox was happy? No! He said, what? 30 years of hard labor? Oh, no, that does not sound like a good deal to me. Please, God, I beg you, I just want 10. 10 years is enough for me. And God loved all of his creations, and he didn't see a problem, and so he said, no worries, 10 years. But the human, being a human, spotted an opportunity and said, hey, now God, wait a minute. If ox does not want those extra 20 years, so you give them to me. God didn't see a problem, so he took ox's 20 years and he handed them over to the human. And then God summoned dog. Dog, your job is also important, because you will also help the human. You see, the human is going to be working very, very hard during the day and needs to rest and recover at night. And that is where you come in. You will stay awake and you will keep the human safe. You will protect the human's body. You will protect the human's property. 30 years. The dog said, "What? 30 years of sleepless nights? No, please, God, I beg you. It's too much. It's too long. I want 10. 10 years is enough for me." And of course, God loved his creations. And he didn't see a problem, so he agreed. And the human spotted an opportunity and said, "Wait a minute, God, if dog does not want those extra 20 years, I'm very happy to take them." So God took dog's years and handed them over to the human. I'm going to leave it for you to be doing the mathematics in this story. Yeah. Because then God turns to monkey and said, "Monkey, your job is also important because you are also going to help the human." You see, the human will sometimes have to make very difficult decisions. And those decisions are going to rest and weigh heavily on the human soul, and that is where you come in. I want you to distract the human from his problems. Entertain the human. Make the human laugh. Amuse the human. 30 years. What? 30 years, said Monkey. 30 years of being funny? Oh, no. That does not sound like fun to me. Please, God, I beg you. I just want 10. 10 years is enough for me. And again, God agreed. And once more, the human said, "Hey, how about I take Monkey's extra years?" And so God took those 20 years and handed them over to the human. And there are still some people in the world who believe that our first 30 years are our true human years. But after that, we move into our 20 ox years where we work hard. And then we move into our dog years where we have sleepless nights. We're worrying about our children. We're worrying about the future. And if we are fortunate enough to reach our monkey years, then hopefully we will have gathered all these wonderful stories to entertain everybody around us. You go. Thank you. So, the lovely thing about events like this, so thank you, Chris, for inviting me and asking me and say, just come and tell stories, is that you think, which stories will I tell? Because storytellers tend to know quite a few different stories. And I was thinking, I told all of these quite serious, quite dark stories last time. Let me tell some nice, bright, happier stories. But also, there is truth in every single story that we tell. An element of truth. And so I thought I would tell one of my favorite stories, and it's a story from Southern Africa. And it's a story that I heard about four or 5 years ago, and it's a story about a young man and his wife, and it comes from the San people of Southern Africa. And one day, this man and his wife, they were out in the plains doing whatever they were doing, when suddenly they looked up. And there, in the distance, they saw a strange-looking cloud. This cloud, it did not float across the sky like all the other clouds. No, this cloud, it came straight up out of the top of a mountain, and they had never seen anything like that before. And they said, "Wow, what is that?" And wife said, "Husband, I want you to go and have a look." Now, this story is an old story, a very, very old story, and some of my favorite stories are the old stories. So old, it takes place at a time when all the food in the world was eaten raw. And when wife proposed that man should go and take a look, well, first of all, he moaned and complained and grumbled, but then he thought, it might be something wonderful. It might be something exciting, and so he agreed. And so wife took a bag, and in it she placed some potatoes, some carrots that he would just bite into later on. And she packed that bag, she handed it over, and whoosh, off he went. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. He marched, he climbed higher and higher and higher. And when he reached the top of that mountain, he saw a strange-looking creature. This creature had a little hat that flickered and wavered in the wind. This creature had a yellow golden coat around his shoulders, and this creature had blue and purple boots on his feet. And man said, "Who are you?" And the creature said, "I am fire, and I have been brought to bring joy and happiness to the people of the world. Come closer, man. Come and sit next to me." And man went closer, and he found that the closer he got to fire, the warmer he became, the cozier, more comfortable he felt. And he sat down next to fire, and the two of them started to tell each other stories. Fire told man about everything that he could see from the top of that mountain. He could tell him about the view on this side and the view on the other side. And man told fire about his life in the village, about his wife, about his friends, about how they lived. My goodness, the stories that they told, they had a wonderful time. They were laughing and sighing and gasping and wow! They were singing songs, they were telling each other jokes. They had the best possible time. And after a few hours had passed, man saw that it would soon be dark and he should probably start heading home. But he had enjoyed meeting this new friend, and he said, "Fire, I want you to come and meet my family. Please come and visit my home. Let me share my life with you." And fire said, "No, I am not leaving this mountain. I'm going to stay right where I am." And no matter how much man begged, pleaded, persisted, insisted, fire's mind would not be changed. And so man had to respect his friend's wishes. He said goodbye, and off he went down that mountain. And he told his wife, "Wife, you will not believe. I have met this wonderful new friend. His name is Fire, and Fire has so many stories. Fire is so funny. Fire is so warm and kind and wonderful and knowledgeable and smart, and Fire is great." And wife said, "Hey, wonderful. So you bring Fire here, we show him our hospitality." "I tried, but Fire refused." "No matter, one day he will come." And after a few weeks, man thought, "I'd love to see my friend Fire. I want to hear some new juicy stories." And so wife packed a small bag of food, handed it over. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. Pakatang, pakatang, pakatang. He marched, he climbed higher and higher. And when he reached the top, there was Fire. "Man, you've returned. Come and sit next to me now. I have so many new stories to tell you. Come. So man went, sat next to Fire, and again they started throwing out story, song, joke, riddle, kitandawili tega. They were having so much fun. And after a few hours, man saw that time had passed and he should be getting home. And he begged Fire, "Please. I would love you to meet my family." But what did Fire say? No. What did Fire say? No. And so his mind would not be changed. So man said, "No problem, thank you, goodbye, see you soon." Off he went, and again he told his friends and his family, "That Fire is an amazing friend. You have never, ever met anybody like Fire." And a few weeks later, up the mountain he went. The same thing happened time after time. The weeks, the months rolled by, until one day man said, "Fire, listen. You have no idea how happy it would make me for you to come and meet my friends and my family. I enjoy our company so much. They will love you. Please, I beg you. And Fire loved man. Fire loved his new friend. And of course, he wanted his friend to be happy. And he said, "The problem is, I have a big appetite. And when I start eating, I just don't know what's going to happen. It's not a good idea for me to come off this mountain." And man said, "Don't worry about that. That's it. That's the problem. Let me tell you, in the village, we have eggs, we have milk. There is a river nearby, we can get fish. We have all the food and all the fruits that you can imagine. Please come. I beg you. And fine. Fire agreed. 3 days' time, he would head down that mountain path and visit the village. And man was ecstatic. Oh yeah, oh wonderful. He raced down that mountain path and he told his wife, fire is coming. He called his friends, fire is coming. He has a big appetite. Let us not embarrass ourselves. You go and get carrots. You go and get the potatoes. You go and milk the cows. You go and get this. You go and get that. And the villagers, they went out. They rushed out, excited to meet this friend that they had heard about for such a long time. And they brought the food and they piled it high right in the center of the village on huge mats. And when man saw the food, he could not believe his eyes. He had never seen so much food in his life, and he thought, wow, fire will be impressed. And he began to count down the days. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, tomorrow. And then fire started to descend down that mountain path. That small vertical cloud of smoke began to move, and they were all watching. Fire is on his way. Fire is on his way. Oh, fire is on his way. And fire was excited. It was his first time off the mountain. He was looking forward to meeting man's friends and man's family. And as he was moving down that mountain path, he was feeling very, very happy, very, very good, when suddenly he noticed some little blades of grass at the side of the path, and he thought, ooh, they look good, they look tasty. Oh, just one bite. Those blades of grass were so juicy and delicious that fire decided to take just one more. And of course, the more he ate, the hungrier he became. And he consumed the blades of grass. And he wasn't just taking small handfuls, huge armfuls, and then he was eating up the bushes. And at this point, all the animals began to notice that something was not right, and they were filled with fear, and they started to run away, and the birds were flapping through the skies, the insects were buzzing, and now fire, he was hungrier. The more he ate, the hungrier he became. The more he ate, the larger he became. Soon, he was eating the low-lying branches of the trees, and soon he was consuming entire trees. Boulders that were in his way were no problem. And now he was a wall of flame. And man and his wife and the villagers, do you know, fire is not as small as we thought he would be. And man said, you know, fire is very small. Fire is very, very tiny. It must just be the angle that we're standing at. Trust me, fire is my friend. You're going to love fire. But fire was no friend. He was now an inferno, and he was racing towards the village. And the villagers, they could see the billowing clouds of smoke. They could feel the heat coming off fire, and they were so terrified. They turned, they ran towards the river, they jumped in, and that is when fire hit the village. He ate the roofs of their houses. He gobbled up the walls. He went inside and consumed everything that he could find, everything until there was nothing left to eat, and poof, he burnt himself out. And it was then that the villagers emerged from the river, and they returned to the village, and they saw the destruction that had taken place. They were horrified. Wife was not happy. She went to husband, how could you do this, huh? You told us that fire was your friend. You told us how wonderful he was, what a joyful creature he was, huh? This is what you call good, huh? This is who you call your friend? This is terrible, terrible. And man felt awful. He felt he had been betrayed by his friend. There was just skeletal, charred remains of his entire home, of his entire village. Nobody was happy. Everybody was wailing and crying, and he was heartbroken. And as the villagers wandered around looking to see if there was anything that they could salvage, they reached the center of the village. And wife, she noticed that something was different. There was an unusual smell, a quite pleasant aroma in the air. And when she saw the mats with the mountains of food, they looked a bit different. And so she picked up a potato and, it was hot. It was hot, but it was soft. So she burst it open and it was fluffy inside and it tasted so good. And she saw that the carrots were soft and caramelized and so sweet. And they went around and the eggs had been baked, the milk had been boiled, the fish had been roasted, and the villagers ate and ate and ate. They were licking and sucking their fingers, the juices were flowing. Life was good. And wife said, husband, I want you to go and bring fire back. And husband said, no, I never want to see fire again in my entire life. Our friendship is completely and totally over. And wife said, husband, how can you say that, huh? Fire is just like you. Fire is just like me. Fire is just like all of us. We all have a dark and dangerous wild side, but we also all have a gift to offer. Look at what fire has given us. We cannot deny that. I want you to go and bring fire back. And she packed a little bag of delicious, tasty foods. And man took it, pakatang, 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 pakatang. Pakatang, 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 pakatang. He marched, he climbed, higher and higher and higher. And when he reached the top, there was fire waiting. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you. I told you that this was not a good idea. I knew that something terrible would happen. I'm so sorry. And man said, actually, we'd like you to come back to the village. And fire couldn't understand. He said, but I destroyed everything. I ruined everything. I am a terrible friend. Unforgivable behavior. I'm sorry, you should just go and leave me all by myself. And man said, no, you have given us this amazing gift. You destroyed everything else, but you gave us something wonderful in its place. We would love to have you back. And fire said, but you saw what I did. You saw how I destroyed that mountain path. How would I even get back to the village? And man reached into his bag and he took out a pot. And he said, if you jump into this pot, I will carry you down. And so fire hopped into that little pot and man carried him safely down that mountain path. And when they reached the village, they saw that wife had created a new home for fire. There were 3 big stones. And man emptied fire into the center of those stones. And to this day, that is where fire lives. And he keeps his promise of bringing joy and happiness to the people of the world. So that's one of my favorite stories. I tell that one quite a lot, and the kids all love it as well, because there's that darkness and that danger, and you can see their faces, and they're like, oh! And I love how stories, you lose yourself completely in them. They transport you into a whole other world, a whole other place. And I remember once I told stories in a school, and there was a child who was about 9 or 10 years old, and I told a story that I'm not telling today, but it was a story about a naughty elephant. And this woman was swallowed by this elephant, and she found a whole world inside the elephant's stomach. And the girl said, oh, was that a true story? There's a truth in every story, right? So I don't know what that 9, 10-year-old is doing now, but maybe she still believes that somewhere there's an elephant and there's a whole world inside that elephant's stomach. But yeah, I love the power that stories have. And a lot of the time in my work as a storyteller, it's not just telling stories for entertainment. You use stories for lots of different reasons. And I was asked the next story I'll tell is a story from Kenya, and it's from the Gikuyu people. And the Gikuyu people are the largest ethnic group in Kenya. We have 44, and maybe 45 now, actually. We keep adding. So so the Gikuyu are the largest. So there are more Gikuyu than anybody else in Kenya. And so this is one of their stories. And I used this story with the Maasai community. I was working with an NGO a few years ago, and we were looking, it was workshopping with the Maasai community who practice FGM, so female genital mutilation, which is a practice that I don't necessarily agree with, but we were trying to find ways of using storytelling to look at challenging behavior or changing behavior or just questioning tradition in different ways. So I thought, if I tell a story that is not from their culture at all, so they can remove themselves completely and not identify, it's a story from the Gikuyu people, it's got nothing to do with us, then it was a way of distancing themselves from a story that actually shared quite similar themes. So it's a story about a woman whose name was Washu. What was her name? Washu. Sorry, what was that? Washu. And Washu was loved by everybody in the community. Well, almost everybody, most people, because she was kind. She was very hardworking. If anybody needed any help, Washu was there. Me, I will help. Washu, if she saw somebody who was feeling a little bit low or not well, she would rush to that person, she would hold them, and she would not leave them until she was satisfied that that person was just fine. And so the people loved Washu. Now, Washu was married to a man whose name was Kamau. What was his name? Kamau. Sorry, what was his name? Kamau. And Kamau was one of the elders of the community. He was a very wealthy man, herds and herds and herds and herds of cattle. And because of his status, because of his wealth, his position, he had several wives and many children. But he was a good, kind man, and he made sure that all his family was very well taken care of. But this is another one of my old stories. And it takes place at a time when there was a particular tradition in the village. It was something that the women were not allowed to do. If the woman was caught doing this one thing, she would be punished and her husband would be punished too. And this crime, this terrible, terrible crime, well, in fact, you can tell me, what do you think? What was she not allowed to do?
Masturbate.
Huh?
Masturbate.
Masturbate? Ah, the women could masturbate. Yeah, they'll find they could do that. Anything else? Adultery? Ah, sometimes if a visitor was in town, you know.
Dancing? Reading?
Dancing? Ah, they could dance. There was plenty of dancing. Reading? Ah, probably nobody could read anyway. It was worse than that. Question the man. Ooh, that was good. Maybe in the family time when nobody else could ever hear, and it was something secret and quiet, because you know some of those women could be very feisty. It was worse than that. The women were not allowed to eat meat. That was it. Do we have vegetarians in here? Oh, this might not be your story. Because the women, well, first of all, the women had many jobs to do. They would look after the children. They would be the ones out in the field. They would be the ones cleaning, doing what? What other jobs would the women be doing? Washing, fetching water. Yeah, cooking. Yeah, taking care of the chickens, all of these things. And the cooking, well, they would cook. But whenever there was a reason to celebrate, if the rains had fallen, if there was a harvest, if a child had been born, weddings, somebody passing on, any reason to celebrate, then a feast was had. A cow would be slaughtered, and all the women would prepare a feast. They would roast that meat, they would stew that meat, they would boil that meat, they would roast that meat, and then they would serve it to their husbands, and they would serve it to their, no, not for you, no, not for you, no. Ah, yes, their uncles, no. Ah, yes, you may have some, their grandfathers, their sons, all the men, but not a single morsel would ever pass their lips. And you know something? They didn't mind. This tradition had existed for such a long time, nobody thought about it. Nobody questioned it. It was simply something the women did not do. Now, one day, a new child had been born into the community. A feast was being held to welcome this new life and all the contributions and benefits it would bring to the society. The cow had been slaughtered. The women were busy in the cooking area. And you can imagine a lot of women together cooking, huh? You hear that sound, right? You can hear it in your head. There's that. They were telling each other stories. And some of those stories were hilarious. And the women, they went... That was bad. The stories were hilarious, and the women, they went. Some of those stories were so sad, and they were. Some were shocking. But for some reason, all the women suddenly had something else to do, and Washu, she found herself alone. Now, those are the dangerous moments, right? That's when your mind begins to wander. You begin to think of things that perhaps you shouldn't really be thinking of. And Washu, she noticed that lovely aroma, and she thought, oh, I wonder what the meat tastes like. As soon as she thought it, she knew she had made a mistake. Oh, how could she? The audacity, even thinking that thought in the first place. And she tried to push it out of her head. But once a seed is sown, it has to grow. And her curiosity grew and grew until finally she couldn't resist. She picked up a knife. Nobody was watching. She took a piece of meat and tiny little sliver and it was good. It was juicy. It was tasty. And she thought, how come the women are not allowed to eat the meat? I don't understand. This is good. But she also knew the law. She knew that she was not allowed to. She would be punished. Her husband would be punished. So she decided that perhaps she should keep it a little bit secret, keep it on the down low for some time. So whenever there was a feast, if any weddings happened, any harvesting, anything at all, Washu would always find her nice, quiet moment and oh, she was loving her life. And then one day, one of the elders had passed away, and there was a feast to celebrate all the contributions that this individual had made. And so the feast was taking place, the meat was being prepared. Washu found her nice, quiet moment, and she decided to take the luxury piece, the fattiest piece, that juiciest, that piece. She sprinkled some salt because she knew this one was going to be good, and she was chewing away. Somebody was coming, and then suddenly there was Kamau. Habari ya leo, Washu. But of course, Kamau soon discovered that his wife was eating meat, and he was furious. He was outraged. He said, Washu, how could you do such a thing? You know the traditions of this community. You're going to be punished. I'm going to be punished. You want to bring shame on this family? And Washu, she didn't. She respected the laws of her community. She didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker. And she said, but Kamau, please tell me, why? Why are the women not allowed to eat meat? But Kamau was so angry, he couldn't bring himself to say another word. He said, Washu, this has got to stop. And Washu, because she did not want to bring shame on her family, decided, okay, let me try and stop. So she agreed. And so the months rolled by, and Washu, she was fine. There was no problem at all. When suddenly, one day, there she was in the cooking area. The rains had started. The women were busy preparing another feast without even thinking about it. She picked up her knife. She took a piece and she had been seen. Somebody had seen Washu, and Washu was dragged before the elders. In fact, yeah. You're in the front seat. These are the expensive tickets. Come. Washu. Hi, tell me. No, come up here so everybody can see your shame. Hey. Yeah, elders, look at this troublemaker right here. Washu, why are you eating meat?
Because it tastes lovely. I want to know what it tastes like.
Because it tastes lovely. So you're curious. You think you can just go around breaking the laws because you want to. You're curious about something?
I wasn't trying to break the law. I just wanted to taste meat.
This This woman is a troublemaker. And where is your husband? There he is, right there. Kamau, come up here. Yeah, you should be trembling with fear. Come and stand next to your wife. Kamau, your wife is eating meat. Did you know that she was doing this?
No, I didn't.
So she is lying to her husband?
Yes.
Yo! I pity you, Kamau. This woman is bad news. Hey, but Kamau, listen. You are one of the elders. You are one of us. We're going to let this one slide for now. Do not let it happen again. Keep your wife under control. Do you hear?
Yes.
Go speak to your wife. Take her home. Take her home. Away. Shoot. Hi. There was trouble that night. Washu asked again, but Kamau, please tell me, how come the women can't eat meat? But Kamau had been humiliated in front of his friends, in front of his peers. He was so angry, he didn't want to speak to Washu. He didn't even want to look at Washu. And Washu thought, hey, this is getting out of control. She could hear their words. That woman will contaminate the minds of all the other women in here. And she thought, maybe I should stop. If I stop cooking, that's it. If I stop cooking, I can't be tempted, no problem, life will go on and everyone will be happy. So she removed herself from the cooking. Whenever there was a feast, she would go and wash and clean and dig and do something else until a year had passed and the chief's daughter was now going to marry the son of the chief from the next village. This was a big deal. The villages would be united, they would be stronger, they would be more prosperous. Life was going to be amazing. So the biggest feast was arranged. Everybody's help was needed, including? Oh, please, this is not a good idea. Please, I tell you, please, don't make me. But Washu was ushered into the cooking area, and there she was surrounded. Now, for the non-vegetarians, you can use your imaginations. For the vegetarians, imagine tofu or mozzarella or something. But you're at a barbecue, and you know that smell, huh? You can imagine yourself just wafting on a cloud of deliciousness. Hi, she could smell that nyama choma. It was so good. She was high. And she began to think, why can the women not eat the meat? Why can the women not eat meat? Me, I'm going to eat the meat. And she took her knife and she took a piece of meat and she sliced it off. She had been seen once again, and Washu was summoned for the second time before the elders. Washu. Oh, this one she had. Did you see that? Look at that. You see this? That twinkle in the eye. You see this one? I was right. You are a wicked woman. Why are you here for the second time for the same crime?
Why can't women eat meat?
Are you questioning?
I'm asking.
Do you think our forefathers were wrong when they made this tradition in the first place?
I don't know.
You're answering back. Where is that husband of yours? Washu, this is bad. Where is Kamau? There is Kamau. Kamau, you were supposed to keep this troublesome woman under control. What is going on?
Got a mind of her own.
I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand that at all. What do you mean?
She doesn't do what I ask her to do.
We will pray for you right now. This is terrible. Kamau, this woman is bad news. If she starts eating meat, all the other women are going to want to start eating meat. Is this what you want? Be careful.
Depends what the community...
This democracy I don't understand. Kamau, this is bad. You are terrible. You cannot stay here and mess around with the laws of this land. You are banished, Washu. You are not allowed to see your husband, your children, your friends. You must go for 1 whole year and think about your actions.
Please.
No, go, shoot. Kamau, you also have to be punished. You're going to go into your fields. You will take your juiciest, fattest, tastiest cow. You will slaughter that cow with your own hands. Don't get your sons to do it. And then we will feast Your other wives will prepare a feast for the men. You will watch us, but you cannot join us. Do you understand?
Yes.
Go and get your cow. Oh. So, Kamau went. He found his cow, he slaughtered the cow, and all of his other wives, they were busy preparing a feast for the men. And these men, they were happier. Imagine an unexpected treat like this. Can I just hear the sound of a hungry man laughing? We know that laugh. Oh, they were so happy. And the women, they were busy roasting, wrapping the meat in banana leaf to keep it clean and fresh, putting it to one side. Roasting, wrapping, putting to one side. Roasting, wrapping, putting to one side. When suddenly, out of nowhere, an eagle flew down. It swooped, it picked up the biggest piece of meat and whoosh, off it went. And the men were outraged. They said, that is our meat, the best, juiciest piece of meat. Chase that eagle, get that meat. And they started to run after the eagle, and they were shouting, chase that eagle, get that meat. What did they say? Chase that eagle, get that meat. What did they say? Chase that eagle, get that meat. And they were running, and the eagle was flying higher and faster and further, and suddenly they saw the eagle drop the meat. This was serious. Hyenas are out there. Wild dogs are out there. The vultures would soon be coming, so they raced even faster, as fast as they could to get there first, when suddenly, they stopped in their tracks. They could not believe their eyes, because there in front of them was Washu. Washu. Oh, Washu, she was so upset. She was there on her own in the wilderness, and her arms were stretched up to heaven, and she said, please help me. Please help me. Help me. Yeah. I've been banished. I ate a piece of meat. Wow! And as if to answer her prayers, something fell from the sky wrapped in a banana leaf, and she picked it up and she opened it, and it was meat. She took her knife, she cut a piece, she ate it. It was delicious. Oh! And when the men saw this, they said, hey, that must be a sign from God. And so from that day on, all the Gikuyu women were allowed to eat meat. Thank you. Do you want to use the stairs? Okay. So yes, that is the story that I told to this group of Maasai women. And afterwards, we had this amazing workshop. We were talking about traditions and why traditions started and when they started, and are the traditions even necessary in our society today? But yes, that is also one of my favorite stories from Kenya as well. But I'm going to tell another story. In fact, I'm going to check now. You're supposed to give me a time. 50 minutes. 50 minutes, perfect, okay. So normally I tell stories from both African heritage, Scottish heritage, but seeing as there's a lot of Scottish storytellers in Scotland, I'm not going to tell any Scottish stories because you can get them another time. So I'm going to tell another story, but this story is, it was told to me by a storyteller, a Shona storyteller from Zimbabwe, and it's another old story. And it's a story, you know, there's the stories that explain why things happen, or how the leopard got its spots, or why the sky is blue, those kinds of stories that explain. And we find these stories in every single culture as well. But I have a question for you. Is there anybody here who has a pet at home? Yeah, ooh, lots of people have pets. Most dogs? Anybody with dogs? Yeah, ooh, anybody with cats? Yeah, ooh, quite a few with cats. I also have a cat. Now, a long time ago, the cats did not live with the humans. None of them, not a single one. All the cats in the entire world were wild cats. They lived out in the plains, and they hunted in packs. And it was a hard life, a brutal life, a violent, vicious life. And there was one little cat And she did not like this lifestyle at all. She hated it. Every day she would wake up and think, another day of just the same. She hated the hunt. She hated the conversations that accompanied the hunt. Who was the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the best hunter? I've got the sharpest claws. She hated the bravado and the arrogance. She didn't like it at all. She didn't like the sweat and how it made her itch. She thought, all this lifestyle, all these blooming cats, I'm tired, I'm sick of it. I'm going to leave them all behind. I'm sure there must be more to life than this. I'm going to go in search of the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she left. She didn't look back. She wandered for 3 whole days on her own. And on the 3rd day, she began to think, I don't know if I've made the right decision. But as she was busy reflecting on whether she should go back and join the pack, she heard somebody approaching. And she peered up over the long yellow grass, and she saw an antelope. And for the first time in her life, she fought that instinct to chase. And she said, let me just watch. And she watched, and she thought, oh my goodness. Look how beautiful that antelope is. Look at that smooth, glossy coat. Look at those fine, elegant legs. Look how graceful and beautiful that antelope is. Maybe the antelope is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she decided to go and live with antelope. Oh, what a time they had. Antelope showed her how to leap for fun, how to spin and pirouette, how to dance like a ballerina. Oh, she loved antelope. They laughed, they had fun. She felt true, pure joy with antelope. And she thought, yes, antelope is so beautiful, the most wonderful creature in the world. And then one day, they went for a little walk in the forest. When suddenly, there was a rustling in the bushes, and then suddenly, lion leapt out, and immediately antelope, whoosh, he was gone, running as fast as he could, and little wildcat, she said, no, come back, my beautiful antelope, where are you going? But antelope was gone, and poor wildcat was heartbroken. The tears were flowing down her little cheeks, and she said, oh, my beautiful antelope. And then she looked at Lion, and she thought, wait a minute. Ooh, look at that beautiful glossy mane. Ooh, look how Lion strides with such pride and arrogance. Check out those claws. Ooh, maybe Lion is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she went to live with Lion. And what a time they had. Lion showed her how to walk as if the world belonged to her. Lion showed her how to laze under the acacia tree and wait for food to be brought. Lion showed her that it was okay to take a nap in the middle of the day, and she loved Lion. And one day, they went for a little walk in the forest. There was a rustling in the bushes, and then suddenly, boom, boom, Elephant, the king of the forest, approached, and Lion, he was not pleased to see him. Elephant had not a care in the world. His enormous size and frame, no obstacle to anything. And Lion, he crouched down low and he bared his teeth and a low warning growl. But Elephant had no time for such silly nonsense, these silly games by these silly boys. And as Elephant approached, he was about to crush Lion into the ground when Lion, whoosh, he took off. And a little wildcat, but no, where are you going? Come back, my beautiful Lion. Lion was gone, and poor wildcat felt that her world had crumbled. She wept and she wept until She looked at elephant. Wow, look at that beautiful, thick skin. I check out those ears and those magnificent tusks. She saw the wisdom in elephant's eyes and she thought, hey, wait a minute. Maybe elephant is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so, what did she do? She went to live with elephant, and oh, elephant showed her a whole other world. Elephant took her for walks just as the sun was setting. Elephant told her stories of ancient times. Elephant taught her how to sit and look up at the stars and imagine all kinds of weird, crazy, wonderful, magical things. She began to think in a way she had never thought before. Her mind was opened to all kinds of possibilities, and she loved elephant. And one day, they went for a walk in the forest. And as they were walking, there was a rustling in the bushes. And all of a sudden, she heard a strange sound, whoosh! And she saw elephant teetering and tottering and swaying from side to side. And then elephant raced out as fast as he could, crashing and smashing his way through the forest. And in the distance, as she was shouting, elephant, come back, where are you going? She looked around, and there she saw a hunter. And the hunter had a bow and an arrow. And she said, hey, but this hunter is so small compared to the mighty king of the forest. But this hunter has used his intelligence, has created something to terrify a creature 5 times bigger than him. Oh my goodness, maybe the hunter is the most wonderful creature in the world. And so she went to live with Hunter. She lived up in the roof of the hunter's house. And one day, as she was busy waiting for those little tidbits to be thrown to her, she was busy relaxing, when suddenly she heard a terrible sound. There was cluttering and clanging and shouting and yelling and wah. And then she looked down to see what was going on. And she saw the hunter outside on the ground. He stood up, and then in a big cloud of dust, he ran away. And in the doorway was woman. And she knew she had definitely found the most wonderful creature in the world.